Islamic State, also known as ISIS, is one of the most brutal and well-known religious terrorist groups in modern history. It seeks to establish a global caliphate through armed struggle and demands the obedience of Muslims worldwide. Rising to prominence in 2014, ISIS exploited the Syrian civil war to seize territories in Iraq and Syria, enforcing its extremist version of Islamic law over nearly 12 million people. However, after years of conflict with American, Iraqi, and Kurdish forces, the group lost its last stronghold in the Middle East by 2019 and shifted to an insurgency. While weakened in West Asia, ISIS remains active in parts of Africa, where it still controls significant territory. Known for extreme brutality, ISIS committed genocide against the Yazidis and Iraqi Turkmen, persecuted Christians, Shia Muslims, and Mandaeans, executed prisoners of war, and publicized videos of atrocities. It carried out terror attacks worldwide, including the 2015 Paris attacks, the 2024 Kerman bombings, and the 2024 Crocus City Hall attack. The group has also been accused of widespread sexual violence and is responsible for the 2025 massacres of Syrian Christians and Alawites following the fall of the Assad government. Al-Qaeda, meaning the base in Arabic, is a Sunni Islamist extremist organization founded in 1988 by Osama bin Laden during the aftermath of the Soviet-Afghan War. It began as a network of Arab fighters who joined the Afghan resistance and eventually evolved into a global jihadist movement with a central leadership and various regional affiliates. Its mission is to unite Muslims under a global Islamic caliphate and wage violent jihad against the perceived enemies of Islam, especially the United States, Israel, and their allies. Al-Qaeda views Western influence, especially from the United States, as corrupting and oppressive to Muslims worldwide, which it uses to justify violent attacks against civilians and governments. It rose to infamy after orchestrating the September 11, 2001 attacks on the U.S., which killed nearly 3,000 people and led to the War on Terror. Al-Qaeda also carried out deadly bombings in Madrid, London, and across Africa and the Middle East. The group sees violence as a divine obligation, interpreting jihad as an individual duty for Muslims everywhere. Al-Qaeda rejects democracy, nationalism, and secular governance, believing they contradict Sharia law. Though weakened by years of counterterrorism efforts, the group continues to operate through affiliates like Al-Shabaab in Somalia and AQAP in Yemen, spreading its ideology and carrying out attacks under the banner of religious warfare. The Army of God. This group is a radical Christian extremist group based in the United States, known for its violent anti-abortion stance. Emerging in the 1980s, it claims to operate under divine authority, believing that killing abortion providers is not only justified, but commanded by God. The group interprets biblical scripture to support what it calls a defensive action against abortion, equating the procedure to murder and those who perform it to mass killers. Members view themselves as soldiers in a holy war to protect unborn children, often invoking Old Testament narratives to rationalize their violent methods. The Army of God is most infamous for a string of arson attacks, bombings, and even assassinations targeting abortion clinics and doctors, such as the 1998 murder of Dr. Barnett Slepian and the 1997 bombing of an Atlanta clinic. They have also issued manuals and manifestos detailing how to carry out such acts, claiming they are fulfilling a higher moral and spiritual obligation. Although not as globally active as other religious terror groups, the Army of God represents a dangerous form of domestic religious extremism, driven by a radicalized interpretation of Christianity. Al-Shabaab is a Salafi jihadist militant group based in Somalia and affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Its name means the youth in Arabic, and it emerged in the mid-2000s as the radical youth wing of the Islamic Courts Union. Al-Shabaab seeks to establish an Islamic emirate in Somalia, governed by a strict interpretation of Sharia law. The group views democracy, secularism, and Western influence as un-Islamic and has openly declared war on what it calls apostate governments and Christian crusaders. Justifying its violence through a rigid Salafi ideology, Al-Shabaab regularly targets civilians, especially Christians and non-Muslims, claiming such attacks are religiously mandated to defend Islam. It is notorious for brutal attacks such as the 2013 Westgate Mall massacre in Nairobi, the 2015 Garissa University attack, where 148 were killed, mainly Christians, and countless bombings across Somalia. The group also enforces harsh punishments like amputations and stonings in areas it controls. While it lost major territories due to international military pressure, Al-Shabaab continues to wage a deadly insurgency, funding itself through extortion, illegal trade, and global jihadist networks. The Christian identity movement is a white supremacist religious ideology rooted in a radical reinterpretation of Christianity primarily active in the United States. At its core, the movement claims that white Europeans are the true descendants of the ancient Israelites, while Jews are portrayed as imposters, and non-white races are deemed subhuman or soulless. This deeply racist theology provides the foundation for their violent worldview, blending extremist nationalism with apocalyptic prophecy. Adherents believe they are God's chosen people and that a divine race war is inevitable, one in which they are destined to purge the world of all non-white and non-Christian influences. They justify acts of violence, such as bombings, shootings, and hate crimes, as necessary steps in fulfilling what they see as biblical mandates for racial separation and divine justice. The movement has inspired several terror attacks in the U.S., including ties to the Oklahoma City bombing and various militia groups involved in domestic terrorism. It overlaps with other hate-based groups like the Ku Klux Klan and Aryan Nations. And while not a centralized organization, its ideas have spread through sermons, literature, and underground networks. The Lord's Resistance Army, led by Joseph Kony, is a militant group that originated in northern Uganda in the late 1980s. Kony claims to be a spiritual medium and prophet chosen by God to establish a theocratic state based on the Ten Commandments and a distorted version of Christian ideology. He blends Christianity, mysticism, and traditional Oxoli beliefs, portraying himself as a divine figure. The LRA uses this warped religious vision to justify brutal violence, including massacres, mutilations, and the abduction of tens of thousands of children to serve as child soldiers and sex slaves. The group is most known for its extreme cruelty, the forced recruitment of children, and Kony's self-declared divine mission, which has earned the LRA international condemnation and classification as a notorious religious terror group. The Jewish Underground was a radical Zionist terrorist organization formed in the early 1980s by extremist members of Israel's settler movement. Rooted in a hardline interpretation of Jewish religious nationalism, its members believed that reclaiming the biblical land of Israel, especially the West Bank and East Jerusalem, was a divine mandate. They viewed Arabs, particularly Palestinians, as obstacles to God's promise, and thus justified violence as a holy duty to cleanse and reclaim the land for Jews alone. Motivated by messianic and apocalyptic beliefs, the group orchestrated a series of terror attacks targeting Palestinians, including car bombings that maimed several Arab mayors in 1980 and a failed plot to blow up the Dome of the Rock, one of Islam's holiest sites. They believed destroying the Islamic shrine would spark a regional war that could lead to the rebuilding of the Jewish temple, fulfilling end-times prophecy. Though most of the group's members were eventually arrested and sentenced, many received pardons or reduced sentences, causing political controversy. Hezbollah, meaning Party of God, is a Shia Islamist militant and political organization based in Lebanon, founded in the early 1980s with backing from Iran. Deeply rooted in Twelver Shia Islam, Hezbollah views itself as a resistance movement against Western imperialism and Zionism, and it sees violence as a religious duty in defense of Islam and the oppressed. Drawing heavily from the ideology of Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini, the group believes that establishing an Islamic government under clerical rule is divinely mandated. Hezbollah justifies armed jihad as a sacred obligation, especially against Israel, which it labels as an illegitimate occupier of Muslim lands. They are most known for their long conflict with Israel, including the deadly 2006 Lebanon War, and for attacks like the 1983 U.S. Marine barracks bombing in Beirut. While Hezbollah operates as a political party and social welfare provider within Lebanon, its military wing has carried out international terror attacks and has been designated a terrorist organization by many Western countries. Hezbollah also supports Assad's regime in Syria, claiming it is defending Shia shrines and combating enemies of Islam. The Taliban is an Islamist militant group that emerged in the early 1990s in Afghanistan, rooted in a radical interpretation of Sunni Islam, particularly the Deobandi school mixed with Pashtun tribal customs. They believe in establishing an Islamic emirate governed by a strict interpretation of Sharia law, which includes public executions, floggings, forced veiling of women, banning girls' education, and eliminating Western influence. The Taliban claims that their violence is a form of jihad, holy struggle, against corruption, foreign occupation, and secularism. They use religion to justify attacks on Afghan and Western forces, and even civilians whom they accuse of being un-Islamic. Most known for ruling Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001 and providing sanctuary to al-Qaeda, they returned to power in 2021 after the U.S. withdrawal. Despite pledges of reform, the Taliban continues enforcing harsh religious codes, severely restricting women's rights, and targeting those who oppose their theocratic vision. HAMAS is a Palestinian Sunni Islamist militant group founded in 1987 during the First Intifada, rooted in the Muslim Brotherhood's ideology. Its charter explicitly calls for the establishment of an Islamic state in all of historic Palestine and the destruction of Israel, which it views as an illegitimate occupation. Hamas frames its violence, including suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and armed uprisings, as a form of jihad or holy war to liberate Muslim land. The group interprets Islamic texts to justify armed resistance and martyrdom, viewing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict not only as a political struggle but a religious duty. They also reject peaceful coexistence with Israel, claiming that compromise violates Islamic principles. Most known for its armed wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, Hamas has governed the Gaza Strip since 2007 after violently seizing control from the Palestinian Authority. While it offers social services and runs schools and hospitals, its military operations and religiously framed resistance have made it a central figure in regional conflict and international terrorism discussions. Lashkar e-Taiba, meaning Army of the Pure, is a Pakistan-based Sunni Islamist militant group founded in the late 1980s by Hafiz Muhammad Saeed. Rooted in a strict Salafi interpretation of Islam, this group believes it has a divine mandate to wage jihad against non-Muslims, particularly Hindus and Jews, to establish Islamic rule in South Asia. The group considers Kashmir a land of jihad and uses religious rhetoric to justify armed attacks against Indian forces and civilians. Its ideology promotes the belief that violent jihad is a religious obligation, and martyrdom guarantees a place in paradise. Let gained international notoriety for orchestrating the 2008 Mumbai attacks, which killed over 170 people and targeted hotels, a train station, and a Jewish center. It operates under various fronts like Jamaat-ud-Dawa to carry out propaganda, recruitment, and charitable work, often blurring the line between religion and militancy. Jaish-e-Mohammed, meaning Army of Muhammad, is a Pakistan-based Deobandi jihadist group founded in 2000 by Masood Azhar, shortly after his release from Indian custody in exchange for hostages during the Indian Airlines Flight 814 hijacking. Deeply rooted in radical Islamic ideology, GM promotes a strict interpretation of Sunni Islam and views violent jihad as a divine duty to defend Islam and establish Sharia rule. The group justifies its attacks as acts of religious warfare against infidels, primarily targeting India over Kashmir, which it sees as an Islamic territory under unlawful occupation. GEM's religious discourse glorifies martyrdom, declaring that those who die in jihad are guaranteed paradise. The group is best known for the 2001 Indian Parliament attack and the deadly 2019 Pulwama bombing, which killed 40 Indian paramilitary personnel. It has strong ties with the Taliban and al-Qaeda and continues to recruit, radicalize, and train militants under the banner of religious obligation. GM often operates with the covert backing of elements within Pakistan's security establishment. The Phineas Priesthood is not a formal organization, but a loosely connected ideological movement rooted in Christian identity theology, which promotes white supremacy and a radical interpretation of the Bible. Inspired by the biblical figure Phinehas from Numbers 25, adherents believe they are divinely mandated to carry out violent acts against interracial couples, abortion providers, LGBTQ+ individuals, and government institutions they view as ungodly or Zionist-controlled. They interpret Phinehas's killing of an Israelite man and a Midianite woman as divine approval for using violence to uphold racial and moral purity. Phineas priests see themselves as warriors in a holy war against a multicultural and secular world. They operate independently, often as lone wolves, and justify domestic terrorism, including bombings, assassinations, and robberies, as acts of righteousness commanded by God. The movement gained notoriety in the 1990s after violent attacks by self-declared priests, including armed robberies and attacks on Planned Parenthood clinics. They are closely associated with other extremist ideologies like Christian identity and the anti-government militia movement. The Jewish Defense League, founded in 1968 by Rabbi Meir Kahane in the United States, is a far-right Jewish extremist organization that claims to defend Jewish people from anti-Semitism through what it calls militant self-defense. Rooted in religious Zionism, the JDL believes that Jews have a divine right to all of the land of Israel and often frames its ideology through the lens of Torah-based nationalism. They justify violence by referencing biblical examples of Jewish resistance and argue that aggression is necessary to prevent assimilation and protect the Jewish identity. The JDL is best known for its attacks on perceived enemies of the Jewish people, including Arabs, Muslims, leftist Jews, and U.S. officials they believe are anti-Israel. The group has been linked to multiple acts of domestic terrorism, including bombings of Soviet targets in the 1970s and the 1994 shooting of worshippers at a mosque in Hebron by a JDL sympathizer. The FBI has classified the JDL as a right-wing terrorist group due to its history of violent acts and extremist rhetoric.